Hello. This is the fourth of a 5-part interview series with former Scientologist Tim DeWall. We've covered how he got into Scientology, joined staff, and even ran the Tampa Church of Scientology for many years. Now we're going to cover what happened after he left staff and what life is like for a public Scientologist in one of the most in-your-face Scientology communities in the world, Clearwater, Florida. Scientology moved into Clearwater in 1975 when L. Ron Hubbard decided that would be the ideal place to set up Scientology operations in the U.S. They moved in covertly under assumed names and using fake companies in order to get a foothold before any of the local residents knew what was happening. Since that time, and despite a lot of public protest, the church has made Clearwater a stronghold of Scientology activities, spending a lot of money to secure themselves as a permanent resident there and get in good with the local politicians, community leaders, and police. As a result, many high-level Scientologists view Clearwater as the ultimate destination spot to live and work, and it has the second highest concentration of Scientologists in the world next to Los Angeles. Scientologists have referred to the flag service organization in Clearwater as the Mecca of Scientology. Tim and his wife Sylvia got out of Scientology just last year after decades of involvement. Let's pick up now with part 4 of our interview and see what it's like to be a Scientologist in Clearwater. Here's Tim. So what was it like to, first off, to transition to be off staff and find yourself now being a Scientology public person?
Weird.
Okay.
I felt kind of alienated because most of these guys had fought with me, thick and thin, 2-3 o'clock in the morning sometimes to get the promotion out for that week, late night staff meetings. These guys had been, we took a kind of a very small org into sort of a still small but somewhat successful organization. And I think a lot of them felt let down. They didn't really understand the new regime coming in.
And when was this that you were basically off staff fully?
Around 92.
Okay.
92 heading into 93.
Good. All right. So just the year we're moving into having gotten tax exemption.
Yes. I remember the being in the org as a public, seeing the big, huge banners up.
Right.
We won the war.
Right. War is over.
Yeah. I sort of hung out at my house for a few weeks and tried to regroup with my kids. I had 2 small kids, and it was different to hang around them because Dad was always gone. I was at either the org or working, and I'd have some time on the weekends. So it was kind of strange to have all this time on my hands, and my kids loved it.
I'll bet. Must have been nice to reconnect and
it was great. Yeah, and I had relatives come visit. It was kind of like very calming in that way, but I was still kind of alienated from almost every one of those guys, aside from the finance people, were my juniors.
Of course, in the church.
There's 22, 23 staff. They were my, some of them would still call me at night and not really report on what was happening, but tell me about their post. And I'm like, well, I don't do that anymore.
Right.
That's your problem. Thank you.
Right. And so the church had transitioned in a new executive director, a new person to run the show. And
yeah, they were really big on the kick of getting OTs in the position of high power in the church.
That's right.
That's what was going to clear Tampa.
It's funny that you say that because that was 1992, 93. The exact same thing happened 10 years later, 13, 14 years later when the Ideal Org thing happened. It was get the OTs on board. They
huge.
have to be the ones to run the show. And, of course, none of them really knew at all what they were doing.
Yeah, they didn't know shit. I had several of them come over and critique my management style and ask me how I was doing and why this person was in this place and that place. At first, when I was the ED, I felt a little like, well, maybe they know something. And then after a while, I would just hand them a contract and tell them, shut up. Either sign this or shut up.
This was when you were still on staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, but I mean, that's just what happened. It'd be
Right.
like I would get that. But there was a huge push to get all the OT7s, all the OT8s in a position of the higher parts of the organization, like ED, Deputy Executive Director, HES, OES, and PES. Because
Right.
that's what was going to make Tampa on the map. That's what was going to make us be a cleared Tampa.
Right, right. Okay, got it. So now from a public point of view, what was your view of what was happening in the org, or how did news, I mean, you were getting phone calls from staff for a while. Did that continue for a long time?
It was off and on, and you know, that was like late 92 until the day we left, and which is another story in 2014. I would routinely have people who were my staff members call me or talk to me or come to my house, or they were still my friends, or they'd come to Thanksgivings or Christmases. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I was kind of a dick, but I was a fair guy in that I would also acknowledge if they got something done, and I would help them. But yeah.
All
I
right.
mean, you become friends with these people.
Of course.
You did it.
Of course, absolutely. No, and you definitely do. So what was your view of what was happening with the church in Tampa now that you're public? Like, did you go to events?
I did, and I saw the org expand, take a jump right away, and get a lot of interest because a big mission flew in. They put the new ED on post, and I was transitioning out. I was the DED for a little while, and even beyond my staff contract, but I was pretty much officially done in 92. But they'd ask me to make calls, and I'd call for those events.
Oh, really?
Well, we never really wanted to have our events combined with flag, but we always eventually, after about 93, 94, there really weren't any more events at Tampa Org. Large events where they used to give you the video and you get your public to come in.
Oh, they combined it with flag.
You pretty much got smashed into it. Well,
Okay.
if you look at the way it's structured now, not to get too far out of the scene, but flag controls Tampa exclusively right now. They took that org from the East U.S.
Right.
Their security guards are there.
Right.
Guys who were my friends at flag, I'm like, why are you here? This is our org now. I'm like, so they just took it after it became an ideal org. And by the way, it's empty.
Yeah, right.
I went there. That's a funny story. I'll tell you about that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So, okay, so then, so when you found yourself, you're getting called for events, what about being regged? What was that like, being, some people trying to sell you Scientology
Uncomfortable.
services now?
Uncomfortable. I transitioned. I was on KTL, paid for by the org because I'm the Key to Life. I was paid for by the org because I'm a staff member.
Okay, so you'd started the Key to Life course.
Yes.
And by the way, the Key to Life course is not really delivered a whole lot anymore, but
No.
It's a huge course that basically covers language and communication and those kind of skills.
Right.
Is what it's really for.
And
So
it's
you were
expensive.
in the middle of that course.
I was about 3/4 of the way through.
Okay, and it's a $5,000 course.
Yes. So they asked me for money, and I'm like, wait a minute, guys. I haven't paid for anything in several years.
Yeah.
I did pay for 2 intensives while I was on staff because I wanted to make the stats go up. I did do that, but
Okay,
that was kind of stupid. But they wanted like $2,000 for me to finish the course and to get my own materials. So I said, okay, being a staff member and knowing how it kind of worked and I could get around the rules a little bit, I borrowed some books from somebody and didn't say anything and said I had my materials because I wasn't going to pay $1,300 for all the KTL materials.
Right, those are very, those materials were outrageously expensive.
Crazy. It was $6,300, I think, with materials to take that course.
Right.
I think it was like on special $10,000 between the Key to Life course and the Life Orientation course.
That's right.
Something
That's right.
like that, some number like that. It was very expensive.
Yes.
And so I wrangled the books, and I said, look, if you have a twin, which I know you guys have twins, and there's nobody purchasing this course, you have a special course room, you send out special people to train. They're sitting on their ass. They're actually being regular supervisors. I'll just help you with one of your students. I transitioned over. I basically did all of this work for the church, and I don't even think I paid. I wrangled myself into finishing the KTL.
And then what was your goal after that? Because you had been on staff now for all those years with the whole idea of being clear.
Yeah, I still wanted to be clear. I still wanted to do that. I mean, I had, at that time, maybe 29 PC folders. I'd had every type of auditing. We'd actually shuttled me down to at least one auditor, my friend who I was helping keep going while he worked full-time at the org. And not to get too technical, but I mean, I had every experimental. I mean, I had, for my post, I had false purpose rundown lists, I had LX lists, I had, you name it, I had it. And I, for one point, was on a correction list called a CS53. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Oh, yes.
For over a year.
And a CS53, for basically anybody who's watching this, is a type of repair action that's done in order to get somebody set up to receive auditing or fix anything that's been wrong in their auditing or in their life, so that they'll be in good shape.
So a lot of coming off of staff and becoming a public meant, technical estimates, evaluations, folders going over to the Mecca to be corrected, clean up this, clean up that. I would get flown to New York and get 2 or 3 question security checks.
When you were on staff.
When I was on staff. So I had all this mishmash of auditing, but I still had this idea when I got off staff that I wanted to be clear. There were endless hours to find out if I was a returnee, and I was already clear.
Really?
Yeah. So my auditing...
Meaning, by a returnee, meaning you'd been a Scientologist in a past life.
Yes.
Okay.
All the way back to the founding Oregon, Washington, D.C., and whatever else was communicated, or I thought happened. I don't.
Did that come up in your auditing? Were you thinking that you had been a past life Scientologist?
Yes, sir.
Looking back on it now, right? I would never have asked you this when we were both in Scientology, because it would have been totally verboten to even talk about this.
Yeah, like bad.
Yeah, totally bad, because you never talk about case or what's going on in your auditing. Was that your idea, or was it suggested to you?
I really don't know. I mean, I haven't, quite honestly, gone back and looked at all of them, because there's 29 PC folders this thick. That's a lot of commands given to a human.
Right.
And you say a lot of things, and there's a lot of things asked, and you are steered, and the meter itself steers you. So the questions were, it got off into like, things went really weird on the drug rundown, like trying to rehab you on all the drugs you had taken. How many times did you smoke this drug or take this drug? And I had a bit of a drug problem, not a huge drug problem, but I had a problem. So a lot of this stuff started coming up because it was sort of suggested, or it was sort of figured out that I was somehow not a good guy in Dianetics or Scientology, but that I was there to disrupt, and somehow I became a plant back prior to going into Scientology, and prior to this time being in Scientology. I was a plant back then, and I was drugged, and it turned into this whole big, it started unraveling, and at some point, do you know if that's you saying it, or are you being steered? I can't 100% look at you, frankly, and go, okay, yeah, I don't know about that shit.
Right.
I can't say that I didn't say all of it, but I don't know. I can't 100% say in my mind. It's kind of like watching TV to be truthfully that actually happened.
Interesting. Very, very interesting.
I can't say it 100%.
No, of course. I get it.
Yeah.
You know, I was a past life clear.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's why it's kind of humorous to me. Because when I worked at the Advanced organization in Los Angeles, where we got people onto the OT levels, it really struck me how many people were coming along saying they had been Scientologists in a past life.
Oh, yeah.
And had gone clear in a past life.
Yes.
And it was remarkable. Like, there were so many that you really began to question the numbers.
Yeah, we actually had a mission come in and look at everyone's folders after these kind of things started happening to me, to a lot of the other staff and public, but to get back to your question, that was the jumbled mess of my auditing. So when I left staff, I'm thinking, okay, now I'm a public.
Yep.
Now they have to take me pretty seriously. Now I have to have progress. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to find the best auditor I can, and I'm gonna get all of this cleared up, and I'm gonna go clear. That was my total intention in 92, 93.
Yeah.
But I had these 2 courses to finish.
All right. So, and did you finish those courses?
I did.
Okay. So then after you finished those, what happened, services-wise?
I went on to a few other services. I did another purification rundown.
Because they found something wrong with one.
Well, I was having problems getting through courses. And it was making my progress kind of slow. So I had routed on to the PTS course.
Okay.
The SPPTS,
Yeah.
SPT, and I'd done that course.
But it was slow going?
Very slow. They were concerned with some of my family members being connected to law enforcement. I was getting a lot of PTS interviews. My Purif went okay, but there was a problem with my ear. So
Your original Purif?
The original Purif was fine. Then I've done 3 Purifs.
Okay.
I kind of wanted to pay for auditing and just clean up all this crap that happened to me on staff. So then I went into becoming a PC.
And I'm highlighting this because I find it fascinating that it was so mismanaged. You're the senior most executive of a Scientology church. Your
Yes.
case is a mess.
Yes, it is.
Right? You've had your folders looked at by Flag and figured out, like when you first got to Flag, when you first got to Tampa, we talked about the fact that your folders went over to Flag,
Right.
got looked over, everything was supposed to be fixed from
There
the
was
mess
a lot
that
of
was
to
St.
and
Louis.
fro. There was a lot of to and fro, and even to the Clearwater mission, because they had an OT8, they had an OT7 Class 8 auditor who was going to fix me.
Right. So here you are getting fixed, quote unquote, over and over and over again over these years, and I just want to highlight that because this is not, again, an uncommon experience.
No, it's very common. I saw my friends and other staff members go through the same.
Exactly.
the same
and you have
thing.
to pay for the privilege of getting your case fixed.
Yes, I paid
every
for
time.
I paid for many hours of corrections and paid for many hours of what they call CSing, where they go over the folder to make sure and cull the folder and folder error summary. And I mean, I paid
Right.
thousands. I know at one point it would be hours at a time, and then I would get these prices, and they said, "Well, it's so bad that we want to send it to Flag," and I'd be like, "It took a month." Then they would give it to a student, and it took a month to do, and I still had to pay for it.
Right.
It was a mess.
Exactly. And it just continued to be a mess. You were having to pay to get it all fixed.
Yes, I was pretty mad about
this
that.
is the end result of being the senior executive of a Scientology church who you would think would be getting the royal treatment, would be getting the best possible service because they want to keep their executives in good shape.
Yep.
But instead, you come off staff and it's a mess. And now you want to get going. And they say, oh yeah, guess what? This very first step on the bridge, yeah, we're going to have you redo that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're gaining and losing. So clearly you're PTS and you must have strange things going on with your family. And so now
Right.
we're going to investigate that. And I just want to highlight how it all comes back to you and you have to pay for it.
Oh, yeah.
Despite all these messes that are being done to you, like you have no control over what auditing is going to be delivered to you. You have a person who's dictating the processes that are going to be run on you. That person is called a case supervisor.
Yes.
Right? So it's out of your hands. It's not like you can go in session and go, I want to be run on this, and then I want to be run on this,
No.
and then I want to be run on this. You just pay your money and takes your chances.
Right, and because I had a lot of auditing when the bridge was flipped, and we had done a lot of research into was I clear or not.
Right.
By the time I got to them, my first intensive that I actually then paid for was all figured out into, review auditing and what was wrong with me and what needed to happen.
Right.
And then a new program was handed to me. And by that time, then it was, okay, well, guess what? Your auditing went okay, but there's some problems here with an old PRIF, and here's the situation with your current auditing. We think you're PTS, so we're going to put you on this course and put your auditing on hold, which, great, thank you. And once you're through this, then you can go back to this new program.
Right. All a bit of a mishmash, a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's important. Because there's this thing in Scientology, there's this attitude or idea that there's standard tech. There's
Yes.
one way to do things. There aren't two ways to do things. There's
Right.
one way. It's the only way. It's Hubbard's way, right? And you're supposed to follow this straight line. And instead, it was like every which way but loose with you.
I never really understood why there was so much commotion and continued problems with my moving towards clear. I was told or evaluated that you're responsible for your own case, as we all were. But I just got to the point where I threw my hands up, and eventually I demanded my folders, even though I was still quote unquote a public at Tampa Org, didn't have anything to do with flag. But I told them, I'm done being audited at Tampa Org. It's done. I want my folders. And I sent them, and I started with a auditor not in any org, a field practice.
Oh, a field auditor.
I dumped them for an OTA Class 8 auditor.
Okay. Who was auditing in the field?
Right.
Okay. So you just left the whole org system behind.
Stayed on course, but I said, send the folders over there. Had them fixed at flag, program was written. I started the program with him.
Okay. And how did that turn out? How'd that go?
He actually cleaned up a lot of the stuff. He was very, very, very instrumental in putting me back on the path to clear. It was funny because he just set me down, and he was kind of like my friend, my ethics officer, my auditor, and he just went through and said, look, I'm not going to lie to you. This is a big mess. You were on these correction lists. You've had all these different types of auditing. You've never really completed a lot of these things, and I'm going to clean everything up. And he did, and got me to a stable point. That was after, I had to pay for that.
I'm curious, would you be willing to say how much you had to pay for that field auditor to clean up that whole mess?
I think it was around $4,000.
Okay. To clean up all the bad auditing and everything that had been done to you up until that point.
Yeah, it was around $4,000.
Okay. So then what happened after that? Were you going to continue with him all the way to clear?
I was, yes.
And what happened with that? How come that didn't happen?
It didn't happen because, like in all of these Scientology systems, it's ever evolving the bridge. So they're adding crap to it. Like, now there's the way to happiness. That was never on the bridge.
Okay.
Or that was never a requirement to get onto the bridge.
Right.
So it was all about going all the way back.
Even back then. Because
we're talking
about 90. What year are we in now?
95, 90, something like that. 96.
Okay, so this isn't beef.
It's
was this in 96 when the Golden Age of Tech came out?
I think it was around 96. Yeah, because there was some new directives that had come down. I think it was Golden Age of Tech.
That's right.
And it was, well, you need this stability to get through all of these things that happened to you, and we really need to correct you and get you stable. That's kind of what his whole path was. And I felt like he did do that. I wasn't really privy to the tech. I wasn't a tech guy. I was in the administrative side.
Right.
I was the guy who was handling everything administratively. I oversaw tech divisions, but they could have told me any goddamn thing, and I really wouldn't have 100% understood, but I knew enough of it to go, yeah, we gotta, you can't. One of the first things that I did with him was the Way to Happiness, because all of a sudden we're cleaning up all of this auditing. I'm getting exciting. Okay, here comes my first step, and the bridge changes, so I get to pay money to do the Way to Happiness rundown.
So after you did the Way to Happiness rundown, right, which is basically a bunch of auditing revolving around the precepts of the Way to Happiness, right? So after you did that, what was your next step after that? What were you going to? What then happened?
I was hopefully going to be going on to the what they call the grades,
right?
0, 1 through 4.
And did you?
Then, no.
Okay.
No.
Can you say why?
I didn't have enough money, so I started running out of money. We got almost to the end of the Way to Happiness rundown, and I can't quite remember. I think I did complete it. I finally found enough money and I completed it, but I was, I'm also on course at Tampa, and I think I'd finished everything there. I'm just trying to remember how it all went down, because it was like, I have this field auditor, but yet I'm on course here.
Right. And it's interesting because you're having to pay the field auditor for the auditing, and you're paying by the hour, basically. You're buying chunks of time. You're not paying for the happiness rundown as a service. Right, you're not saying, okay, for $2,000 you're going to audit me on this whole rundown.
That's not how it works.
That's not how it works. It works because you're paying for chunks of hours.
Right.
And so, do you remember about how much you had to pay in order to get through that happiness rundown?
I think the problem was I can't remember. I never really kept good records, but I remember it was probably another intensive, because he also sold blocks of auditing that way. So I don't know, maybe another 3.
Okay.
So I think I was probably into him for 6,000 or 7,000 at that point.
Yeah.
By the time I got to it, to try and be honest with the numbers, because I can't remember.
Sure, fair enough.
And but I was still on.
And then you're doing course over in Tampa.
Right.
And then you ended up on course at Flag.
Yeah, because I was just done with Tampa by about 97.
Okay.
Because I had fought them for my folders. There was a whole regime change. There was a new ED. They were moving, they were moving away from a lot of the people that I knew that were on staff, and some of them went with them, and some of them had routed off. I was kind of like becoming really like just a Joe Public. Nobody really knew me. My nostalgia of being the ED was kind of over. They had moved a couple of times and into better quarters. They were growing pretty good. They had a good ED. They had a lot more support system than we did. And I was just like, okay, you guys kind of messed up my case. I'm sort of just falling between the cracks here. I'm just another public here.
Got it.
There's no reason for me to stay here. So after my PTSP course there and one more PRIF there, intermixed with all this other things that were going on, I just said, I'm done driving over the water. I'm going to stay at Flag and keep my Class 8 auditor here who's actually stabilizing me. It was a very jumbled mess there.
Yeah, I get that.
From the time that I left until about 97, 98, when I started feeling more stable, because now I'm at the Mecca.
Well, and that's what I want to talk about, right? Is what is it like now to be a Flag public?
Stiff.
Hey, what do you mean by that?
Well, you were never to be late. Back in the day, I could go when I was in St. Louis, and I was just this young punk and didn't give a shit. if I was late, I could kind of talk them out of it, and I wouldn't get in too much trouble. They were really pushing the heavy acceptance level. When I got to Tampa, I was pretty much on staff. If I wanted to go in the course room, at the time I wanted to go in the course room, I was the fucking ED of Lenore. I'm going to the course room when I want to. But at Flag, if you were late, you immediately went to ethics. There was nothing. You were going to go, and you were going to write up OWs. Something was going to happen to you because you were not going to be late. Plus, you were always constantly asked to donate to the International Association of Scientologists almost nightly after the end of the course.
Now, how did that go exactly? Describe that, Elizabeth.
Well, it's just strange. One of the things that marked strange to me when I was first at Flag, and I felt this a little at Tampa, and I knew it as the ED, but there was this whole volunteer ministry course. Remember the volunteer minister?
Mm-hmm.
And they would wear the yellow shirts, and they would go out in disasters and give out water bottles and help people. Well, there's always been disasters throughout the years, so there'd be a disaster, and you would see them march in. There'd be like 14 or 15 of them strong with their yellow shirts, and some of them are OT, and they would stand up at the end of course, and they would ask for money to handle this disaster. But a lot of the money was handled for logistics, and I'm thinking, you mean like for airfare and things like that? And I'm like, well, don't you guys, from your general membership because to become a lifetime member at that time was $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
I paid that.
To be a member of the International Association of Scientologists. So the church wasn't paying for any of that.
No, and you'd hear like Travolta or Cruz. Well, I never heard Cruz's name. I never heard Cruz ever write a check for anything, quite honestly. That was never ever said to me. Travolta seemed to be the guy who would write the checks for the more of the outer helping, where you're trying to get people to accept Scientology. Like he would write checks, but I never heard Cruz's name come up for
Me neither.
Stuff. But they would just pound you for that. Especially because you hated disasters. You hated going to course when there was a disaster because you knew you were going to get pounded.
I see. So this was a routine thing?
Yes.
Okay, so this was not a one-off.
No, because they would come up, there would be other things. I mean, when Obama and another senator from Illinois, somehow they came up with a bill that was going to go federal about women with postpartum,
postpartum depression?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that they wanted to. The IS had this big push to get money so they could stop that bill. So because it forced women, every woman who was going to be pregnant or had become pregnant to sign up to see a psychiatrist. That's what we were told.
Right, which was not actually true, but that's
Probably not.
But I'm fascinated that you're saying that's what you were told.
That's what we were told.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to say is there were certain levels, like there was a lifetime level, there was patron, there was all these different levels, but that never stopped the IAS. I mean, if you had 30 cents in your pocket, $5, $100, or whatever, at the end of that night, when you're in the course room there for 45 minutes, it's going on 11 o'clock, you end at 10 o'clock, your points are usually in by 10:10, and then, you got a special person coming to talk to you. Well, and people would actually say, I'll give you $100, and they would give that $100 so they could go the hell home.
Right. So I want to be clear about this
Sure.
now. So you're regularly attending course at Flag.
Yes, I'm in the 1A course room in the Coachman building.
Okay, and as a routine action in the course room, people are coming around after course is over, and they're pushing you guys to give money.
Yeah,
whether
betterment,
it's for the volunteer ministers,
libraries,
commercials.
commercials.
Okay, so it
anything.
wasn't always the volunteer ministers. Sometimes it was the International Association of Scientologists guys, or the library guys.
You knew the International Association guys because they all had black jackets that said IAS on them with gold lettering on it.
Right.
And you'd be like, oh shit, they're here, great, and I'm going to be here for another 35 minutes, and I'm not going to be home yet. And
Did they ever? Because people are going to wonder about this. How did they sort of force you to stay
Stand
in
by the
room?
door.
They did.
Yeah, and the supervisors would stand by the door, and the supervisor would stand by the exits until virtually they made a certain target. Like they would say, we're going to make $2,000 or we're going to make $5,000.
So they just walk in the room and announce, we're not leaving until we have this much money from
Yes.
you guys.
Yes.
Did they ever set up a chalkboard?
There was a board.
Okay.
It was not a chalkboard. It was a
Whiteboard.
whiteboard with a erase marker.
Right.
Yeah.
And they would just write the figures on the board.
With the person's name.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And they would just go around and pressure everybody in the room.
Yeah. I mean, I was a hardened staff member. I'd been around. I knew it. I'd been on the end of forcing people to pay money. So
Okay.
I'd just say, no, I'll just wait it out. Because I knew.
Okay.
It was just, what's that word, rapacious? It was just, get out of my face. I know you're trying to collect money. I thought, yeah, it's all good. I don't have a lot of money. I wasn't thinking they were doing something bad, but I don't have any money, so get out of my face. I was on course anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week, and if it didn't happen 2 to 3 times a week, where there was one of the betterment groups, somebody coming in, making an announcement, somebody, pushing you to go to graduation, where they were then making more announcements. Because when you went to graduation, there'd be a little bit of food or dancing or whatever, but then there'd also be the guys in the black jackets.
That's right.
And
graduation
nothing was ever done.
Graduation was Friday nights.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good.
And
So
I
that was
used to
weekly.
just walk out. They'd be waiting at the door and suggesting you go at first, and then they probably make people go now, for all I know. I just don't, I'm not going. Well, you left course early. Well, that's because course is done. There's no supervisor in there. I'm leaving.
Right.
Yeah,
So you were hard-nosed about it.
I never really got in too much trouble with that flow because I just never really lied to him. I had a good friend who was on staff with me, and when I first got off, and I didn't really know how to handle him because I was the guy doing that to other people. And he said, you know what, if you just say no, and you say it sort of, not impolitely, but just rough, most people, even in the Sea Org, will leave you alone.
Very true. That's actually very true. Because
Yeah.
Sea Org members are people, too.
Yeah.
And, they're not just a bunch of automatons.
Yeah.
And very few of them are actually super, super hardcore.
No.
They're
humans. A lot of those Sea Org members that I met, I actually liked, especially the lower level ones, like the course supervisors or the people who help you clear up words. People like that. It was hard to see them get their ass chewed, and I watched that. I watched that flow because I've chewed a lot of asses, and I used to watch, and I would see them back in the back lines, and a lot of people,
meaning sort of off a public view.
Public view, getting their ass chewed by a senior Sea Org member.
Right.
I remember one of my friends, Kevin, who was a word clearer. This guy was coming to chew somebody's ass, and the courseman thought he was the guy, so he starts at Kevin. So I just kind of nudged in his way a little bit, just to let him know I was there. And he looked at me for half a second, and then Kevin replied to him that he wasn't the guy, and then the guy stormed off. But I just kind of put myself between me and Kevin, because Kevin was my friend. I really started looking at the errors of my ways. I guess that's why I'm saying that, because I was the guy taking people in rooms and shoving all their shit off the desk, screaming at them how they're not clearing the planet and shit like that. So
now you're seeing it from the other side.
I'm like going, and I'm also being regged, and it's like not fun.
Did you start getting the idea, like a lot of people have described, that there's Scientology, the organization, and then there's Scientology, the subject? And while the subject, and Hubbard himself, who's dead, was good, maybe the organization was being run poorly, or...
After sort of looking at my staff experience, my very limited public experience at Tampa and St. Louis, and then kind of with rear views, I could kind of see where things were very tumultuous with management in terms of changing. Like lots of policies were coming in, and they didn't necessarily seem to relate to the tech. I always thought of the tech as being pure no matter what. If there's a policy error or if there's policy changes, the tech will always protect you if you know the tech. And it just seemed like about the 5th rendition of the same book, having to buy it 5 times, and just seeing the heavy push of the IAS, I started getting an inkling that international management was changing. I didn't necessarily know they were bad, because if you went and you looked at the internet or a newspaper, well, you got to spend time in ethics before you could get to the priceless technology that you wanted. So I felt I could feel at Flag it was becoming unfriendly, not friendly. Because when I first went to Flag, they had t-shirts that said, "This is the friendliest place on earth." I don't know if you ever saw one of those. Flag Land Base.
That's right.
Well, now you can't go in one of those buildings unless you have a lanyard, unless you're photoed. Now that didn't happen when I was on course there, but shortly after I left, that started happening. Plus events. You have to be tracked.
Right.
So I'm like, how the hell is it the friendliest place on earth if that's the situation? You're tracking with all of the public relations about Miscavige.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were there little whispers about how much of a tyrant or a badass or a tough leader he was? Yeah, there were whispers. There were things. You knew about the Rehabilitation Project Force and how he could order people there, but they must have done something. You didn't really have any. You had to go outside the organization to find anything bad about this guy. Now, with the rearview mirror and looking at it, these people had the shit scared out of them by this guy. He could ruin their life in a snap of a finger.
Yeah.
Because I remember one of my friends who was in the Sea Org, who was a longtime friend, and he told me a funny story. He said that a guy came to post kind of disheveled and he didn't look right, and Miscavige had been breezing through a building to do some inspections on something in the Sandcastle, another building that the church owns, where they had done some construction, and now that I know that he's kind of a micromanager, he had to like go see it. Well, I guess this guy didn't look right, and he wasn't very respectful to David Miscavige, and I guess Miscavige ruthlessly ripped this dude's face off, screamed at him, yelled at him, and then ordered him off post. And my friend told me the story. That was the first.
Your friend, the Sea Org member.
Yeah, he's like sitting there watching it, because he was one of the ones who personally painted one of the buildings, and he was a long-term friend of mine, and so I got an idea there was a little bit of a human there, and I got an idea that if Tim DeWall could be turned into a dick running people by that organization, that heat's coming from somewhere, and if he's the top dog, I started getting the idea that he's bringing the heat through. But again, I'm full scale chugging Kool-Aid, man. 5 gallons, fuck it, man. I'm a Scientologist. The papers are all wrong. The court things are all documented that are bullshit. Anybody says anything against Hubbard or international management just doesn't care.
Good.
Or they're lying. I'm pretty solidly, you could call me Mr. Church. I was a Scientologist.
Well, and that's why I'm asking about it.
And I am not now.
No, I get that.
For the record.
I know, we'll get to that.
Yes, sorry.
So no, but that's why I'm asking is because I'm actually really curious about where your head was at.
Well, when I first got out, when I to just pull forward really in advance, when I started realizing there was something wrong, I was scared to go look at the internet, and I was even not going to go back because I didn't want to know that Miscavige was bad. And I eventually never wanted to know that Hubbard could have done something bad.
Very key point.
But I have been all over the internet now, and both of them have done really bad things.
That's right.
I'm sorry, but they have.
All right, fair enough. So is there anything else to... well, you got... Okay, so let's cover one other specific thing that happened to you when you were a public, because let's talk about your marriage now. You were married to a woman who you had 2 kids with.
Yeah,
And
she
wanted
had a
to-
baby.
Yeah.
She had a baby prior to being a staff member who was about 10 months old.
Okay.
And when she got there, she was really cute. She had a baby. She's kind of like, I'm the ED. You know, there was, because when a new girl would show up, you've been there, everyone's trying to vie for the girl. Because, you know, it's a little weird in a marriage thing on Scientology.
Yeah.
But, so I married her, and we had a 10-month-old. She had brought a baby, and then about 2 years later, then I had a baby with her. So I have my son and my daughter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so now you're public, she's public, right? Because
Yes.
you left staff, she left staff.
Yes.
You guys are now being Clearwater public. You're raising your kids. You're doing your Scientology thing.
Right. She
But
never
then-
really ever made it over to the Clearwater. She stayed in Tampa.
All right. And then you guys got divorced.
Yes.
When was that?
That must have been right around late 96. Around 96.
All right. And then she decided she wanted to join the Sea organization.
Yeah, she was on course
Uh-huh.
and doing pretty well at Tampa. She had all of the staff pressures off. I was no longer her boss. I was no longer her husband. She didn't have to listen to me. You know, I think all the long hours, all the fights, all the different viewpoints, and I think she was kind of like, she never really gemmed in with the whole management point of view. She was more laid back, and I was hardcore. I was like what you call Mr. Church.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really liked being in charge of it. So she then, we kind of grew apart, got a divorce, and she started liking a staff member at Tampa Org who was in the Treasury Division.
Okay.
But he was dedicated. He was going that dedicated circle. He wanted to be in the Sea organization. He wanted to sign the billion-year contract.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she knew she could no longer rely on me. I was done. I was living with some other people. You know, I wasn't even in my house, though I was paying for it.
Because you guys were divorced now.
Yeah, but I was paying for my house. And he wanted to go in the Sea Org. He signed a contract. So she was going to help him replace himself and go to the Sea Org together in New York.
All right. And then what went down with this? How did they...
He left about 10 months prior to her, so the pressure started to really mount. She was sort of helping them in Treasury because she's a trained Treasury person, and they were putting a person there. So I had been off staff roughly a year and a half, maybe a little bit longer, because I was always going in there calling and volunteering, and every now and again I would get the ED would throw me something to do because she knew that I could get it done, but I was never going to sign a contract. I was being asked to come back, but no. So I finally got a call from my friend at CLO East US, Joyce, who was my old programs chief. And she said, look, we've got your wife here, you know, we can do a conference call, but she wants to join the Sea Org. And I said, yeah, I've heard that, but she has a problem. And I'm like, yeah, she does. She has 2 kids. They're my kids. She's solely in charge of them. I'm no longer married to her. I don't even live in the household.
And so under the terms of your divorce, you did not have shared custody.
I had shared custody, but it was very limited because the way it came down is she didn't really have income, but I did. So I don't know why, but my visits were the weekend visits. We had dual custody of one kid, but since she had the other kid, I had no custody.
Okay. Of her biological daughter.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Though it was almost exactly the same because she was just like 10 months old. She's just never known another dad. Well, she has, but I'm dad.
Understood.
So the program chief calls me and says, look, will you take the kids? And I'm like, do I get my house back? she goes, yeah, we'll make any deal you want. You can get your house back. You can get, you're no, you can sign a piece of paper that says you're no longer financially responsible for her. And I put in there, I said, then she doesn't get the kids back. No custody. Well, we can't do that. We're not a court or whatever. You can work that out with her, but we need to get her arriving here. Okay, she has to get there before Thursday at 2.
Did this call happen to occur on Wednesday night?
Like a Tuesday night, Monday, Tuesday night, because it took a couple of days for them to work on me.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, here's what we'll do. She has to immediately sign a quit claim deed. The kids are going to be with me. And, oh my God, from my new girlfriend, which was Sylvia, who's my wife now, to all of these women, she's abandoning her kids. But the Sea Org did not look at it that way. They didn't give a crap about those kids.
Right.
They wanted another member.
That's right. And it's so interesting how, having been in the Sea Org for so many years, I look at what's happening right now. Like you're telling me about this, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
this totally makes sense. This is exactly how they operate.
Oh yeah.
But that's why. But I'm fascinated. So Sylvia's viewpoint was, what? She's leaving her kids?
Yeah, and
which of course is the correct viewpoint.
Yeah, and then I had a friend who another girl who said that to me, who was a staff. I mean, she was a public, and several other people, but the only one that was really pushing it hard was Joyce. So I agreed.
And who was Joyce?
Joyce is the program's chief, calling me from New York. She was like my senior for years, so it was kind of like we were always back and forth. We became friends. You even though you're fighting with these people, they're the people you work with.
Understood.
You eventually become friends with them.
Sure.
So she just said, "Hey, can you take the kids?" And I knew that she was abandoning her kids. I knew that. Well, it got over into my family. Even though my family knew we were divorced, now we're divorced, and now she's running away from her kids. So I took some heat from that. But I finally just handled them, and I said, look, I'm going to remain a Scientologist. I'm going to take my kids. Eventually, I might get married, and again, but the kids are going to come with me. But yeah, there was no regard from the Sea Org.
No, the kids are just an impediment.
Yeah,
they're
they
just
were
a
in the
barrier.
way.
There's something to be handled.
Yeah.
How old were the children at this point?
10 and 7. That's right, 10 and 7.
So what did the kids think about what was happening? Because they were old enough to have their own independent thoughts about this now.
They really weren't. They were happy to kind of see me again, because by that time I wasn't working all the crazy hours. I lived in a stable house. They were enrolled in schools, and they would see me every night unless I was on course, or they would see me on the weekends because I was there. So, and then I exited their life to go away from the house because we got a divorce prior to her joining the Sea Org with her soon-to-be new husband. And they were sad. They didn't understand why Mom had to leave, but it never came up as a long-term, had to talk to them, handle them. I just kind of think they'd been around, unfortunately, around that whole thing where they saw families. A lot of families break up in Scientology. It's not just happened to me.
Right. This I understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very common thing for Scientology, kids and parents and things to be tumultuous and ever-changing.
Did your ex ever get time off to come see them?
No.
Really?
She, during her Sea Org time, which was really only turned out to be about 12 to 16 months, I think, and then she washed out of the Sea Org.
Oh, she did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, so she was so she was gone for a year and a half.
Pretty much, they were on with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did she come back to Tampa?
She came back and moved to North Tampa, and then she would visit the kids after that.
Okay.
But it was rough reacquainting them, because they had kind of written her off. They knew about the Sea Org. They kind of knew she was going to live in New York, and we were going to live in Tampa, and I was going to be their dad, and eventually, I would get married, and they'd have a new mom, like a stepmom.
Right. Okay.
Interesting. So she came back. So there's sort of a better ending than not with
There was
this.
a reunion, but it was more of, because we were already divorced, and there was already this time away. There wasn't a huge closeness. I can't go on record and say how close they are or not to their mom because I don't know.
Got it. I get it.
I can tell you some things they've said about their mom, but I don't think it would help her.
Fair enough.
I'm sure they've said things about me to their mom.
I'm sure they have. Kids are kids.
Kids are kids.
Yeah. When she came back, did you guys go back into a shared custody situation, or did you retain sole custody?
No, we always just stayed away from the courts and just tried to handle it in the Scientological point of view and didn't try to drag them through the custody thing.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that is very interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Was there anything else to your experience as a public person that you would like to share or talk about, in terms of what it's like to be a Scientology public or...
Well, there's demand above and beyond being on course and being in auditing. There's events. And if you don't attend events, you're kind of frowned upon. And they keep track of who attends events or not, I guarantee it. And they don't necessarily have facial recognition that I know of. Good. But they have lists. Mm-hmm. And after you start to wander away from the events, it's not good. And I think just the whole point of view of being how well, there shouldn't be classes in the church, and I believe there is. Like there's the higher level, sit up front, pay a lot of money.
Oh, you mean the caste system?
Yeah, there's kind of a caste system.
Yes.
And what always bothered me, if I could elaborate, is and maybe people from other churches might feel this way, but it's, what are you on now? What are you doing on the bridge now? Where are you at on the bridge? What are you doing? Hey, what was your last course? And this is at parties. This is at could you not think of something else to talk about besides Scientology? And it would drone on and things like that. So it's just, there's a lot of internal pressure to be on course. There's pressure from your friends. There's pressure to do financial things with your money. So you're getting it from your public friends, from the church. And it's just, now that I'm away from that and I don't feel that, I feel a lot more comfortable.
There's a kind of report called a things that shouldn't be.
Right.
And why don't you explain, when would you write that versus when would you write a knowledge report? What was your understanding of the difference?
Well, a things that shouldn't be was more for a lesser offense. Let's say you had somebody Scientology kid over at your house and you used a strong language, or you might have said something that didn't parallel exactly, I don't think those recruiters should come to your house and take your 13-year-old kid and have him join the Sea Org. Mm-hmm. That could be something that could be noted down on the things that shouldn't be, goes clearly past you without your eyes ever seeing it, and over to an ethics officer who then calls your house because you've said something now against the Sea organization, or that kid not really being a kid but thought of as a small adult. He's just in a little body, and that kind of thing would have to be cleared up.
All right.
A higher level offense would warrant you what's called a knowledge report, where you are supposed to get a copy, and that is wildly and rampantly out because you never do, or we never did, and that would be for a higher offense. That might be for, let's say, if you got drunk in your own home and there were other Scientologists there, or you said something against Miscavige, or Mr. Cruz, as he was like to be called, or something like that.
Mr. Cruz. It was Mr.
Yeah,
Cruz.
That's what there was. I never saw a written directive, but I had friends in the Sea Org that said that's what we call him.
Right.
And I'm like, no, that ain't gonna work. I mean, I know his mom, I know his sister, I know all these people. I'm not calling him Mr. Cruz.
All
I
right.
I know his relatives live near me. I'm not calling him Mr. Chris.
Got it.
I didn't have anything against him at the time, but I'm not calling him Mr. Chris.
Right.
Come on, Jesus.
And what would, just to be really clear about this, because this is interesting, when an ethics officer would call you, or you would get called in to come and see an ethics officer because some report had been written on you,
Sure.
what happened? What would,
Oh, well,
you know,
I
what
mean,
would they do?
depending on the severity of it, it never really was much more than what they called an ethics program to correct you for your behavior. Like if you said something against someone coming to the house to be recruited, you know, because that was rampantly known, you know. You got these 13, 14-year-old kids that are in 8th grade, 7th grade, and they're being eyed up to join the Sea organization, you know. And it became common knowledge you didn't like that. Like my kids would get calls all the time, or they'd go to the base and be regged for hours on end to join the Sea Org. So, you know, if you said something against that, you'd be lightly reprimanded. Like, that's not the best survival for Scientology and for clearing planet Earth. You know, or you might have to, like, do you have any overts on the Sea Org? Because you write, you know, some OWs, or maybe do what's called conditions and go back to your course, or go back to your life if you were not on course or not. Because not everybody in Scientology is on course or getting processing.
Right. But they are still subject to being called in by an ethics
They're still
officer.
subject to being called in. They're still subject to being asked what you're doing on the bridge. It's a whole breed of thought of going towards cleared planets.
Hey everyone, I have very good news. What I'm announcing here is the culmination of 2 years of work on my part to expose Scientology and give you the actual facts about what really goes on behind its closed doors. I've completed and published what I believe to be the definitive guide to Dianetics and Scientology, titled Scientology A to Xenu, an insider's guide to what Scientology is all about. Why should you get this and read it? Well, if you want to understand how people are lured into destructive cults like this and why they stay, this book gives you those answers. If you want to know what Scientologists really believe and why they're willing to cash in their children's college funds, take out second and third mortgages, and even forsake family and friends, this book gives you those answers. If you want to understand why Scientology has amassed so much money and power, and why it seems that the police and the courts are powerless to stop them, those answers are in here as well. Was L. Ron Hubbard serious about Dianetics and Scientology, or was it all just some big con job from the very start? What did he really believe? Why did he start Scientology, and despite all his wealth and power, why did he die alone and afraid? Finally, everyone has heard that Scientology believes in space aliens and some guy named Xenu, and we've all seen South Park. But is that the whole story? Not even close. There's a lot more to know about why Scientologists think they're saving the world, and I break it all down piece by piece. I believe you will not find a simpler and more complete explanation of Scientology's confidential scriptures anywhere else. My own personal story is in here, and in more detail than I've ever discussed before. How I grew up in Scientology, why I started working for them, and eventually joined the Sea organization, and what happened exactly that made me come to my senses and get out. All of that is just chapter 1. For anyone who seriously wants to understand Scientology, you cannot do it without this book. It comes with a complete glossary of terms and an organizing chart so you can see the Scientology hierarchy and how it all works. It comes in paperback and as an ebook. I'm currently recording it as an audiobook as well. Buy it at the CreateSpace e-store or on Amazon today. I've put links to both in the description below. To all my fans and subscribers, thank you so much for your support over these past 2 years. You have made this possible. Believe me when I tell you, this is just the beginning. Stay tuned because a lot more is coming in this new year. Thank you for watching.